and welcome to the DreamOn Podcast. I'm your host, Adia Karthik, and today I'm joined by someone truly inspiring, Lauren Cannell. She is the 2025 ACT Woman of the Year and founder of the international nonprofit organization Diverse Education and Artfulness. Lauren is a humanitarian and global changemaker who has spent the past decade using art to educate, empower, and heal communities. From working with displaced children in Colombia to transforming education and mental well-being programs right here in Canberra. Through her work, she's redefining how we think about learning, mental health, and community impact, proving that creativity can be a powerful tool for real change. Today, we'll talk about her dream, how she turned it into a reality, the challenges she's faced along the way, and what advice she has for anyone with a dream. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I want to begin by asking a few questions that are focused specifically on the mental health and psychology aspect of your work. So your work sits at an intersection between art, education, and mental health. And why do you think creative expression is so powerful when it comes to supporting well-being?
Well, there's a few things. It's accessible, so it doesn't discriminate from anyone. Anybody can do art. Increasing the grey matter in your brain has proven by research to improve your cognitive processing of information, memory, problem solving. And to increase grey matter in your brain, you need to use creativity. So, they're the reasons sort of why we started using art. In Colombia, I was also working with kids who had experienced trauma and neglect, internally displaced refugees, and also here in Australia was working with kids with autism and moderate to severe intellectual disabilities. So art was a beautiful way that was accessible for them to understand things and express things, but also through doing it, they were healing their brains and retraining their neural pathways.
Oh, that's beautiful. And you've worked extensively in these mental health and education areas. So from a psychological perspective, what do you think young people are struggling most with today?
Look, I think, and I wouldn't only say it's young people because, in a lot of ways you guys get it a lot more than the older people, which is why I love doing these types of things, because young people in a lot of ways get it and are trying to not only convince their peers who don't get it, but also they've got the challenge of convincing the older generations who still don't get it and are still up against them. So I think the biggest challenge for me is still systematic racism, actually. I think it's something that a lot of kids end up having for no fault of their own, from their surroundings, their environment, people who don't understand intersectionality or, diversity around them, kind of imposing their views on them, which then, as young people, you take on what the respected adults around you think and say, and you repeat that, and that's how we, analyse behaviour. But I do think the biggest problem we're still facing is systematic racism.
Yeah, I definitely understand the discrimination. It's still all over the world. And from your experience, what's one simple thing that people can do to support their well-being?
Look, I think for me, it's coming back to what our First Nations and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have always done, and it's two things. It's connecting to country and grounding yourself every day. So, I was saying to a friend the other day, if I get to 9:30 in the morning and I haven't been out in the bush that's that backs onto my place, I almost start feeling sick.
Yeah.
And so it's something that I find I've done daily for a long time, but never really associated it with grounding. And I was like, well, that's actually my grounding. Yeah. And the other thing I really encourage people to do is to share stories. Because that's how we find things in common with others. And finding things in common with others is the start of tolerance of differences, which is the start of breaking down systematic racism.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I think our world is becoming so increasingly digital and online. It's just so important to just go outside and share stories too. I think that's human experience. I think that's what connects everyone.
Yeah, I mean that's why Artfulness was born as well. Get people enjoying being off devices and digital stuff, and get people enjoying raw art without perfectionism again.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Okay. So now let's get into the core questions. So what was or is your dream? What have you always wanted to achieve or create?
Look, I think when you say what was or always was your dream, I didn't dream of doing these things, I have to say.
Yeah.
My dream when I was young was like any young person's dream: work, party, travel, repeat.
Yeah.
Work, party, travel, repeat, which I did a lot of in my 20s, and I had a great time doing those things. And I encourage young people to do those things because a lot of my experiences and seeing poverty and seeing different forms of diversity from my travels and experiences, whilst it didn't inform my dream, it made me realise that I think my calling is to help people. And being blessed, even though, my parents came as migrants, being fortunate enough to have what I have now and the knowledge that through education I've been gifted, I just think that it'd be stupid of me not to share it with others.
Yeah.
So, when you talk about dreams, my dream was always in a way and has continued to grow and change. But, it wasn't really a dream. It was seeing a need and a problem that wasn't being addressed and saying, well, I can either choose to ignore it and continue to live in this world of privilege, or I can recognise that I'm privileged and understand that even though those problems don't directly affect me, I'm from a position of privilege, I can actually help contribute to solving them and contribute to maybe 2 of those kids escaping poverty, or, and that's the kind of approach I took. It wasn't really a dream, it was like seeing a problem that wasn't being addressed and me going, I can choose to be materialistic and ignore all these things and continue my life this way, or I can choose to take all this beautiful knowledge and, education and, things that I have inside this head and use it to try and help people. That was kind of my choice. So it wasn't really a dream, it was more like a choice.
That is such a beautiful perspective. Yeah, really like being selfless and like not just focusing on like what you have, but what you can like help contribute to the world. That's amazing. Yeah.
Look, I'm not always selfless though. I do still go shopping and I like my things too. So that's the other thing I want to encourage too.
Yeah.
You can do a bit of both. It's okay.
Work hard, play hard.
Yeah, in a way, yeah.
And what was your biggest inspiration? You touched on this briefly just now, but like what inspired you to, really like dedicate your work towards helping people?
Look, I mean, a lot of it was experiencing and seeing different forms of poverty around the world. Some things that hit home for me was, when I first went to India, for example, and, for a few weeks there I was looking after a little girl whose father had told me she was going to be sold as a sex worker from the age of 12. Those types of things break my heart. And then, marrying a Colombian and working with internally displaced communities of people who'd lost their land and homes for no reason but the fact that they wouldn't give it up for people to farm cocaine. Like all of those things just made me realise that you kind of have to help if you can, and I encourage people to do the same. Like if you can, you should help. And I think the one moment that really got to me was in Colombia. There was a little girl, Indigenous girl, and, living in poverty. Her parents, had to work long hours, so she was on her own a lot. And she was actually abducted and killed, and, the guide offered her some money to get in the car. And I just remember she took, she just thought she needed the money for her family. And it resulted in her, losing her life. And the guy who did it was a very, very rich architect with very powerful connections, It was a big case in Colombia. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, what happened to her rights? Why the fuck didn't anyone teach that girl that she could say no? And she didn't, and, it's resulted in, like, her cousin that was with her, he's been mute ever since that happened, a lot of knock-on effects from that one case. But that was that one case where I was just like, no, I'm not going to sit back anymore.
Yeah. No.
And I started a project to teach children about their rights.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that's actually so shocking. Yeah, but it's amazing that you've used like all these like hardships that you've seen to like try to like change the world for the better. Yeah.
Imagine if everyone did that.
I know. And how did you have the courage to, chase this dream to help people? How did you have the courage to, start something like new? Like you had an idea and then you just chased it. How did you have the courage to do that?
I mean, look, I'm really fortunate in the sense that my husband is very supportive of everything that I've ever wanted to do, which, having a partner that supports your dreams and aspirations is really important. But, you know, we just seen the injustice for the kids in Colombia particularly, and he's Colombian. We did a bit of research around why they kept making some poor decisions and perhaps, you know, becoming pregnant young or joining a gang or doing things that, you know, resulted in them being incarcerated or, you know, left in custody. So my husband and I did a piece of research about what are they learning in their education system, the small amount that they were getting, because these kids don't get education for a full day because of the, you know, the poverty that they live in. And, you know, none of the kids there were learning, no matter what level of economic status, they weren't teaching them in their schools about their rights, they weren't teaching them about eliminating violence peacefully, and they weren't teaching them about sexual and reproductive health. And at the time, I was a sexual and reproductive health teacher here, and also teaching kids with, you know, moderate to severe intellectual disabilities. And I was thinking, God, here I am teaching kids with like severe intellectual disabilities about, you know, sexual and reproductive health, and they're not even doing it for the kids basic in school here. No wonder why kids here are falling pregnant at 12, 13, 14, and that just, you know, wrecks their life. So it was kind of like, you know, the thing that enabled me was my husband, really, because he joined in that partnership to do that first piece of research that actually enabled us to come up with Educación Diversa being the pillars of teaching human rights, sexual and reproductive health, and eliminating violence. And then with Artfulness, it was from teaching our Drawing for Your Rights program here and just analysing the kids in the classroom and realising a lot of these kids actually have early signs of mental health illnesses, and they have no idea, which means their parents have no idea, which means they're not going to get help till they're severely mentally ill or refusing to go to school or isolating themselves or doing things that, you know, self-harm, things that lots of young people are turning to these days because they get so severely mentally ill that they then can't access the help. Or when they're at the early stages of being mentally ill, they don't know. So Artfulness wasn't like, oh, take the chance. It was, well, look, if I don't do this, Headspace is, you know, the mental health services here, and they're overwhelmed. So for me, Artfulness was an opportunity to kind of support the community and mental health services in a non-clinical, fun, accessible way, you know, and provide an alternative for you young people to come and engage in creative programs and artistic, you know, projects and things, so that you don't get, to prevent you from getting mentally ill, or to kind of help you help yourself before you get to severely mentally ill.
Yeah, that's an amazing, like, unique solution for, you know, such a complicated problem. But yeah. And what is your mission? What do you hope to achieve or fulfill with Artfulness and diverse education?
With Artfulness, look, if I succeed, it won't need to exist anymore. As in, like, people would just embed creativity into their lives and connection to others into their lives. So Artfulness, we use a combination of mindfulness and art to connect people and bring people together, you know, so different types of programs, workshops. But realistically, if it's successful, we wouldn't have to exist. So, you know, the idea is that success looks like, for Artfulness, people like yourself choosing to get off devices and go, no, I'm actually going to go paint a picture, or, you know, no, I'm going to spend an hour just playing with some clay, or, you know, like making those active choices to train your brain back to being able to process information without getting stressed out, being able to solve problems without giving up. Like, those things are all coming because you've severed your neural pathways in the brain from too much digital and screen use. Like, there's actually now research around that, guys. And also that whole thing of, like, just getting off screens for a bit and not putting yourself in comparison to everyone else online all the time, you know, is really important. Like, what you all see of me online is not my whole life. Like, I do want to make that really clear. I have my moments where I'm curled up in bed and I've had a fight with my husband, or my kids are, you know, killing me too. And, you know, we all have those moments. So, like, I think it's really important as well that we all, the way to kind of stop always comparing yourself to others is just get off that screen.
That is.
And, you know, Artfulness is there to provide like alternative ways for people to do that and come together. You know, we're going to start holiday programs, come meet other young people who aren't in your school, do some stuff together, connect with your community, and, you know, start having fun again. You know, there's all those reels coming out about the 80s and the 90s and what we did. Like, had to wait to press record on the tape recorder. Or, like, that stuff's real. And it does real brain stuff for you as young people.
Yeah.
And you young people are very fragile with your brains at the moment because you're teenagers.
Yeah.
So risk taking is this really fun, I know, it's this really fun thing, you know. So at the end of the day, you know, if Artfulness succeeds, then you guys will just be doing, like, young people will just be doing that and be raising their kids to do that, and it won't need to exist because it's just a normal part of your lives, like checking your Instagram in the morning or whatever.
Yeah.
And if Educação Diversa succeeds, well, look, that's all about children learning about their rights.
Yeah.
So if people uptake on the programs that we do and schools start to actually let us roll out the programs, because that's been a big challenge, you know, it's still an uphill battle here in Australia, teaching children about their rights, and the United Nations has deemed Australian government in violation of children's rights for the way we incarcerate them and the way we treat our refugee children. So we are actually deemed in violation of the Convention of the Rights of the Child at the moment. We were investigated last year. So at the end of the day, look, it's still an uphill battle, teaching children about their rights. Our Children and Young People's Commissioner does a great job, but, you know, she's one person.
Yeah.
You know, we've got a program, but that relies on people bringing it into the schools and you know, paying for it.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, for me, Educação Diversa has succeeded when I'm seeing children actively advocating for their rights in the community and actually pushing governments to change stuff. At the moment, it's still kind of us old people, but I'd love to see more young people writing to our local members and saying, you know, this is what needs to change and here's some ideas of how it can, you know, like really wanting to see young people, because as I keep saying, that you guys are our future. A lot of the time you guys have more access to information and can get it easier than we can. So yeah, that would be a success for Educação Diversa, seeing kids actively, you know, sort of advocating for their rights.
The youth empowerment is so important. I feel like it's like we really, like you said, we are like the future. Like, I think the choices we make today will affect us in the future, and I think it's so important that more young people like get involved in the decisions that will ultimately affect them. And back to your mission about artfulness, that is so true. Like, social media, like, I feel like it almost promotes like this like constant like grind culture. Like, I feel guilty for like not like working or like not doing homework. Like, I feel guilty if I like sit down and read a book, and just like the constant comparison. Like, if I see someone like doing something, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm falling behind, and that's just like, that just negatively impacts me so much. I'm sure it affects so many other people. But I love how you said, you know, like, there are moments where, you know, you do just have to like take a break and just have to,
I think, you know, one of the best things, one of the most productive things you can do for yourself sometimes is rest. And again, coming back to your brain, like your brain actually needs downtime where it's not being stimulated by anything, you know. And I was saying it to my daughter, I've got a 12-year-old daughter, 6-year-old son, but like I make her ride to school because it forces her to have brain time, or you know, like she's not going to give up her swimming because that's an hour of her brain time, you know. But it's really important that we remind ourselves that having so much technology and digital input into our brains isn't normal, and our brains historically weren't built for that, and it is affecting concentration skills, it is affecting neurodivergent kids in a way if it's not controlled. It's affecting everyone actually. Mental health for young people, it's just through the roof because of that constant comparison, you know. And I think it's about time we all just realise that you are who you are, I am who I am. Believe in yourself, do the things that you love, be passionate, and just don't look sideways, because that's actually the way you keep going forward. Nobody keeps going forward by looking sideways. That's beautiful. Like, everyone is just like on their own like path in life. You're like, you're in your own like race line, and like other people, like, it doesn't affect like what you do in life. That's such a powerful reminder that, you know, you don't always have to like keep doing things because you see other people. You don't have to do the things that they're doing. You can just do whatever, you know, you want and just feel fulfilled in that. It's actually one of the first tasks for me. I, with Artfulness, will pay someone to do, because I don't actually enjoy that part of business, you know, like as in the marketing, the shiny stuff. That I like to get down and get the work done and do the impact, but I don't like to advertise. So, you know, those types of things for me, what I've learned about social media is, oh man, get someone else to do it, because when you have to do it yourself, you do get drawn into that world pretty quick. It can be addictive, you know. And so for me, I'm like, you know, this is the role in both organisations. Get off to a specialist to do, so that you don't have to worry about it.
I think like mental health and just like relaxation, it's become so much of like an afterthought. It's like, it should be a priority. Like you said, your brain really does need it. Do you have any suggestions of like the most like beneficial almost ways to like give your brain like that relaxation, that downtime that it needs?
Oh, I mean, I'm always going to say art.
Yeah.
You know, any form of art. So I've already painted this morning.
Oh, wow.
So like I do little rocks, you might find them around Canberra, but I paint little messages on rocks and leave them around Canberra. So I've already this morning sat for 15 minutes and painted a rock. Music, I'm a musician. I grew up in a household where my dad, we were just surrounded by music. We had a music room.
Yeah.
So I sing, I play music, you know, any form of art.
Yes.
Even I see sport as a form of art as well, you know, movement and walking. Like every day at some point I'll walk. And in fact, I walk a lot. If I've got big meetings, I'll get on the phone and walk while I'm on the meeting. But, you know, that whole like actually breathing in fresh air, like being aware when you're listening. So going for a walk is great with headphones, but going for a walk without headphones in nature is even better.
Yes.
You know, that whole tuning in to the sounds around you, the smells, it's beautiful at the moment. At the moment it's just rained. You know, get yourself out into a bushland and, you know, just breathe in the nature, listen to the sounds.
Yeah.
You know, don't be so stressed that you don't have a purpose for what you're doing.
Yeah, that's
just
exactly. That's so true. Like so many times, like I'll sit down and I just feel so guilty for not doing anything. And also like you said, like going for a walk without headphones or any like stimulation, that's so hard. Like all my friends, like we'll be walking in between class and we'll have like AirPods, headphones in. Yeah, it's just, you really need that time to just disconnect and just like connect with like yourself, with like
it's called third space. So if you want to look it up, it's called sort of like third space time. And you know, in between activities brain health, it's really good to have a couple of minutes of third space. So if you're a student studying, you've got exams and stuff, you know, do your exam, but then go somewhere on your own and have 3 minutes of third space time before you go and do your next exam, because it's actually telling your brain, okay, you finished this activity now, let's cut it off, let it go and move into the next. So you're allowing your brain to transition to the next activity and let go, so you can process what you've done, but you can also learn from the next experience. You know, the way that schools are built and the curriculum, you know, it's pretty archaic. It doesn't allow for these things, but realistically, if we want to see healthier schools with more inclusion, less bullying, because we know that's crazy in ACT at the moment, you need to enable third spaces in between classes, and I think schools should be facilitating that, because you said no kid's going to just take off their AirPods and go, hey guys, I'm going to my third space room. But, you know, I was watching Heartbreak High and I was like, man, having a room that kids could use as a third space room in between classes and making that, you know, putting some boundaries and stuff around that room with some sensory spaces, I think those types of things, or sensory gardens in schools, I think those types of things are game changing. You know, and I do think that, you know, there's an obligation with the new child safety standards for schools to do more. And, you know, especially the one around culture, you know, perfect opportunity to bring in, you know, someone like Richie Allen and build a native sensory garden in the school. You know, so many opportunities now, but it's just this continuous archaic way of approaching things, which is another reason why Education, Diversity and Artfulness were born, because I wanted to provide kids with alternative forms of education. It's really like you said, like everyone learns a different way, and to have that like flexibility where you can, you know, go into your third space, take a moment for yourself, that is so important. And I'm really glad, you know, you're working towards that, and hopefully in the future that will be a normal thing. I mean, we did it when we were younger. It was called wagging, and it resulted in missing a class. But, you know, at the end of the day, like I do think things like that would be a lot more accommodating. And when we've got, you know, up to 40% of kids like school refusal, simple things like this could be very effective. Definitely,
and what was the biggest challenge you faced in your career, and how did you overcome it?
Look, I think the biggest challenge is, you know, being a human rights activist, being a women's rights activist as well. You know, I was mentioning this to you before, you lose a lot of friends. Because not everyone aligns to your values, or perhaps, you know, you become more vocal because you've got a platform. So obviously, you know, I've been given a platform, so it's enabled me to be more vocal and use this year to kind of scream, and people have listened. Prior to that, you know, people would look at me as more of a disruptor, or, you know, oh no, I'm not going to let her, you know, come near my kids. She might teach them woke things or things like that. So I think, you know, also being a mum in the school, other mums looking at the work that I do, it's not always favoured. You know, when you're advocating for the people of Palestine or the Congo or Lebanon, or, you know, there's still a lot of Islamophobia out there, as I said, systematic racism. So, you know, there's mums at the school that don't talk to me, or, you know, my daughter obviously is quite vocal in the way that she approaches things too. So, you know, obviously it has an effect on the way my children are and their values as well, but it also has an effect on, you know, the people you end up surrounding yourself with or choosing not to, you know, and I think that was a process earlier on when, you know, Edelkos and Diversa started picking up traction that I did struggle with, because, you know, you've got friends that you've had for life. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you realise, wow, like I'm advocating for Palestinian people and my friends pro-Israel. You know, it's moments like that where you start realising, you know, we've loved each other our whole lives. Yeah. And this is the moment where we either need to coexist or actually go, it's time to let it go. You know, so I think those are the types of challenges I've had. Yeah. Business challenges, you know, the normal stuff that you get, you know, you get, Edelkos and Diversa is all volunteers from around the world. So you get volunteers who just don't do what they say they're going to do, people who don't turn, you know, normal things like that. But, you know, my management approach is always to kind of lead with kindness. So Edelkos and Diversa was built on volunteers and continues to be all volunteers, including myself. And, you know, there's over 100 of us around the world doing different things, but at the end of the day, you know, it's built on people and people wanting to help other people. Yeah. We've never had any government funding for anything. It's always been through donations and things like that. So that's something for me, I think, has been really, really powerful, but also very challenging. Yeah. And then Artfulness, well, it's a new business. It's my second business. I also work part-time in Department of Climate Change. So, you know, my challenges is around time management. I still like to read the books to my kids at night, go to their sports. So, you know, the challenge really is just juggling my time.
Yeah, and like you said before with, you know, the challenges you faced with, like, people, you know, having different opinions or, like, not supporting you, do you have any advice? Because your voice is such a powerful tool, like, you can do so much with it. Do you have any advice on, like, how to, like, stand firm, like, on your opinions, even if, like, other people don't support you?
Look, I think sometimes you just walk away. Like, my advice is don't always try to, like, have those battles with everyone. Yeah. There's people who are just never going to change. There's people who it's ingrained in them, and they're the people who you'll end up distancing yourself from, because it's not the people who are willing to learn or willing to listen. Like, I've got plenty of friends who disagree with things that I say, and we have great conversations about it, and they're respectful, and that's how I also learn sometimes, you know. So it's not about removing yourself with anyone who doesn't align, but it is about, you know, distancing yourself from people who are only going to kind of put shade on you. Yeah. Because, you know, you're young, shine your light. You've got such a bright future. Like, and if we continue to just kind of live in the shade of others, like, you know, look, I'm living with the results of baby boomers being high consumers and the result on the environment. I think every day about what that's going to impact for my children and their lives. But at the same time, I also think, well, I'm not just going to sit back and do nothing about it. Like, majority of the people I know, I'll do something. So my hope is really, like, I just encourage you, don't let people put shade on you. Yes, you know, just keep shining. And if someone's trying to shine shade, just go, I respect your opinion. We're just going to have to agree to disagree and walk away.
That's so true. Yeah. Like, having, like, there's so many, like, disagreements I have, like, about, like, issues, different things, but, you know, everyone's, like, open-minded. They're, like, willing to hear what you have to say, and I'm willing to hear what they say. I think having that, like, open mind and being open to hear everyone's things, that is really important. And distancing yourself from people who, like, refuse to, like, even, like, listen to a different perspective, I think that's really powerful. And how did you turn Artfulness and diverse education into like a thriving organization?
Oh, look, Edelkos and Diversa was a team effort, like lots of great volunteers over the years, being a good leader, so people wanting to continue to do stuff, and, you know, having great projects that are interesting, engaging, and aligning them to the people who want to do those things. So that's how Edelkos and Diversa has worked, you know, people who come on as volunteers, so anyone can come on as volunteer, but what we try and do is ensure that the project that we're going to put them on, or the piece of work, really suits what they want to do, that it's a win-win for both parties. So Edelkos and Diversa works like that. Sometimes we've got lots of volunteers, sometimes we don't, sometimes we advertise and we get lots of applications, sometimes we don't. It's, you know, it's just one of those things. And as I said, with Edelkos and Diversa, we've got our established programs, so it's just building new stuff. It doesn't have to happen fast, you know. And we started to slowly get some grant funding to do some pretty cool stuff. So this year you'll see we're going to produce some songs here.
Oh, nice.
We've actually got one coming up for Youth Week. So if you're 16 to 25 years old, next Friday we've got a song production workshop. Come and rap for your rights.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it's about your rights. So come along. We've got a rapper who's producing it with us, and that's going to be pretty cool. But yeah, look, with Education Diverse, things will start happening a lot more because we're starting to get little bits of funding.
Yeah.
I'll continue to do art on the road, and I've got a PhD student, Han Worsley, who's going to do her PhD basically underpins and provides the evidence for the effectiveness of using art as an alternative form of education. So that's pretty cool. With artfulness, look, where are we going to take artfulness? Was that yeah. Look, with artfulness, I'm trying to support mental health and community services. So rather than kind of establishing and going through that whole getting my own shop front, things like that, I can't afford that at the moment. It's looking for the bigger clients like the YMCA, PCYC, Comms at Work, Headspaces, all of those, Beyond Blue, looking at ways that we can support them in non-clinical ways. So we're rolling out, one of our programs will start end of April with Headspace in Goulburn. We're doing some incursions with some schools here. We did some work with Canberra Grammar last year, so we're looking to grow that, and we'll start our holiday programs and things like that. But realistically, the next couple of years is all about building up the case studies for artfulness and making sure we gathering the evidence to show the effectiveness of what we do. Yeah. Because once we've got that, then it becomes a pretty easy sell. At the moment, we've still got people who don't understand, neuroscience. It can sometimes still be hard to get them over the line. So it's kind of like focusing this time on getting the research and that underpins the effectiveness, and trying to partner and collaborate with some of the bigger organisations that already know where the problems are and can kind of lead us into those areas so we can support the most vulnerable people here in Canberra.
That's amazing. And you mentioned one of the biggest things about making this reality was being a good leader. What do you think are the most important values or most important lessons you've learned in order to become a good leader?
There's a couple. Look, I will always say lead with kindness first. So if you are going into an interaction where you don't feel like you can be kind, don't go into that interaction. Remember that everyone's got shit. And you don't know about it. And you probably will never know about it. So just, again, be very mindful when you're having interactions with people that their life isn't social media life. That one. And the other thing I'd say is, look, as a leader, we should always be trying to do things that is a win-win. So if one of my employees or volunteers isn't going to win out of what they're doing and I'm not going to win, then I'm very honest and upfront with that. Sometimes we'll have volunteers and I'll actually have to say to them, I just don't think I've got the right position for you at the moment. It's hard to say that because there's a lot of people who now are not-for-profit who really want to work with us, but if I can't give them something that's going to meet what they want to do and help them achieve their goals as well, then it's also sometimes me pointing out, this is a win for me, but it's not a win for you.
That's really
And it's also teaching people as well, don't compromise yourself or your worth or, what you want to do for the sake of others. Make sure it's a win-win. So I think they're probably the three things that I'd say about leadership. Lead with kindness, ensure it's a win-win, and just remember everyone's got their shit.
That's, the compassion is so important. And then you also spoke about time management, having to balance all these things. What advice do you have, or how did you do it? And already with school and sport and this, I'm struggling. I can't even imagine how you're doing all this. But what advice would you have to effectively manage your time?
Oh, look, I mean, I'm going to say, look, I don't think I'm the person who should give advice on this. Firstly, I have autistic ADHD brain, so it enables me to store a lot photographically and also drop the ball, which happens. I try and schedule everything in, so I have a calendar app that actually blocks out all my calendars. So when you book a meeting with me, it blocks all my calendars, so that's helpful. I also have a paper diary because I'm a visual art kind of person, so everything goes in there. But realistically, I also think it's sometimes like I've also learned cancel, reschedule.
Yeah.
People understand. It's okay to say, sorry, but today's a holiday, or look, I don't need to do this piece of work for another 2 weeks, so do you mind if we push it out? And that's actually what I did today, because I knew I had the podcast. So I actually had some back-to-back meetings afterwards, and I actually yesterday went, do you know what, I want to give the proper time for this. I don't want to be stressed. So I didn't need to do that work for another 2 weeks. I actually just pushed them out so that I can do this comfortably and relaxed, and then go home and do a chunk of work without me feeling stressed and that I've let anyone down. So don't be, I think, just don't be scared to reschedule if you need to. Most people are understanding of that, and some people actually, if they've also come to that determination that, fuck, like, what are we going to talk about tomorrow? Like, you know, they're sometimes relieved, you know, and it is that thing I said, well, you know, the thing I was going to review that we were going to meet about, I haven't got yet. So, you know, let's not meet.
That's really powerful. And you also spoke about like the importance of downtime. How do you, because it's such a struggle sometimes to like prioritize that. Like, how do you like prioritize that and like make sure you have that relaxation, that downtime, that third space that you were talking about?
Look, I mean, I've got the Headspace app, so that's pretty helpful. It reminds you when you should do a bit of meditation. I try to, it just has become part of my day. So like I work from home, so it's pretty easy for me to get up and just go outside for a 10-minute walk. I've learnt that taking meetings while you're walking, people don't care. I've learnt that some business meetings with a lot of social impact people we do is actually going for a walk together, or, you know, so it's kind of, you can embed self-care into your day as the norm. And once it becomes the norm, as I said, I get to 9:30 and go, oh my God, I haven't gone outside. You feel it? So it just becomes the norm. Having Artfulness and Education Diverse are both being art organisations. You know, when I'm designing classes or designing programs, I do the actual art. So look, that's not really with mindfulness in mind, but art is a way of, you know, doing it. So I just kind of encourage you all to find ways to embed it in your life. Like choose the option of, I'm going to park a bit further away, get there a bit earlier and walk. You know, I had a meeting yesterday and I looked it up the day before and went, oh my God, that's in the worst locations for parking. So I just went, you know what, leave a bit earlier and walk 15 minutes. You know, and that also, I just kind of built it in. It meant that I arrived at the meeting, you know, earlier, I felt good. You know, so it's also just like, life can wait, don't be in a rush. Like I think also young people, you guys rush a lot. And you've got this thing of, I've got to get there because I'll never get a house and I'll never get this. Don't worry. Like I actually, like, you know, I live in an apartment now and I think to myself, look, it's great, I've got my apartment, but how would I feel right now being so stressed about $1 million mortgage if I'd taken one out? And I think to myself, I get up every day and I'm really stressed about my mortgage because I chose not to live like that. You know, so I think there's also that thing of be really mindful of what you choose to aspire to in life. Don't aspire to what Hamilton, the racing car driver, has, or Kim Kardashian. Like, they're pretty unrealistic expectations. Like, just aspire to be you and do the things that make you happy.
That's beautiful.
You know?
I think just like slowing down and just like, and like really like making a conscious decision to like do something that you enjoy, something that like is just gives you a break. I think that is so important.
Otherwise, your brain will make you have the break, and you'll have a breakdown. And young people, it's happening more and more. You'll start having bad thoughts, and if you don't get, you know, like you'll just go down a negative pathway. So, you know, it's also that thing of just be true to yourself and aspire to be who you want to be, not anyone else.
Definitely, that's beautiful advice. And you started your work in Colombia with displaced children, and you did give me a story about that. Was that kind of the moment, like, you realized, like, you had to do something? Or
look, I think it was the exposure, and like, you know, I'd seen obviously a lot of poverty around the world from my travels, but it was always on holidays, you know. When I went and lived in Colombia and was working in these communities, you know, every week sort of thing, and getting to know and actually have relationships with the kids and the people there in those communities, it just made me realise how much those communities have to do on their own without any help. Like, you know, Colombia's not like government here, there's no Centrelink payouts. And it just felt like an injustice to myself, at the person who I was, and to the people I was choosing to surround myself with to not do something more.
Yeah. And what has been the most rewarding experience for you, and why?
Look, there's been a few, but the most rewarding experience was I went back to Colombia last year to run Art on the Road, which is a project where we deliver our children's rights classes around. We tour around Colombia and deliver it. And one of the kids that I had taught back in 2010, when he was 8 or 9 years old, I'm going to say, he delivered the workshops with me.
Oh my gosh.
In Colombia.
Yeah.
So, you know,
That's
over 10 years later,
yeah.
but it's also that thing of he got out.
Yeah.
He escaped poverty. He's working now. He's delivering workshops with me in the foundation. He's inspiring others. He did it.
Yes.
You know, and that for me was, pretty heartful moment.
Yeah, that's such a full circle, you know. Yeah, you know, it's really like powerful how you've like dedicated your life towards inspiring and empowering people. That's,
I haven't dedicated my life. Like, I have to say this because I tell people all the time. Like, I was a disruptor. I was getting up to no good when I was young. I was, you know, running around the streets of Queanbeyan in Canberra. I was, you know, that typical private school girl who was super naughty.
Yeah.
I travelled my 20s, discovered it all, and then was like, no, I've got to do something about it. Like, I had my thing of I worked in, you know, international business consultant, partying my life away. Like, I did all those things. So, like, I don't want people to think that this is something that when I was young, I was like, I'm going to change the world. Like, because that's the other thing. I think you young people are doing very serious things very early. And I think that you're missing out on, like, a big, like, your 20s is your play, like, you know. And so I do sometimes see young people and go, while I'm so inspired by what you're doing, are you going to get to your 40s and go, why didn't I, like, party my ass off? Or why didn't I travel the world? Or, you know. Yeah. So I do also say, like, I do want to encourage people to say, like, look, I was a very, you know, very much a disruptor. School didn't really work for me. I was very smart because of my autism ADHD, so I got through academically. But I skipped grade 4, so I went from year 3 to year 5, and I finished school when I was 16.
Oh, wow.
So I was like the youngest in my grade because my parents put me in early too. So I had people who were almost 2 years older than me in my grade.
Yeah.
So I do think to myself, like, a lot of that had to do with why, because I wasn't like this academic A student. I did reasonably well, but you know, I didn't end up going to uni. My brother had a pretty bad car accident, so I didn't go to uni. So, look, I'm here as someone who doesn't have an undergraduate. I've got someone now doing their PhD on my organisations, you know, and I'm a pretty successful, you know, business person and mother and partner. So, look, I think what I do want to tell people is, you know, your dream doesn't have to be for like something that you have from young. It can be something that evolves. It can be something that changes. At any point, you can down it and, you know, do something else, and you'll find that your experiences in life and the things that you do all contribute to probably what you're going to ultimately end up doing or dreaming to do.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, you really don't have to figure everything out so young. Like, life is a journey. Like, everyone, like, you didn't go to college, like, you didn't go to university. Like, that's so like inspiring, because like everyone's like life, it's like so different. But you can, like, all of them are like equally important. You know? So I guess you really just have to find, you know, your own path.
And it was difficult. I've got Indian parents. So, you know, I've still got parents who still suggest, why don't you go and study this? And, you know, in a way, like, it's lovely. And it's, you know, but it's also like this moment where you go, well, you don't have to.
Exactly.
I'm pretty successful without doing those things. And now I've got someone who's like doing their PhD on my ideas. It's kind of like, well, maybe I didn't have the academia, but I definitely had the ideas and the right, you know. So you don't always look. I'm not here saying to kids, don't go to uni. I'm here saying, look, it is there for a purpose for certain careers. But I'm just here to also say that, look, you can be very, very successful in doing and trying and testing your ideas and giving them a go, because that's what Educação Diversa is. It's a list of art ideas that align to human rights, sexual reproductive health, eliminating violence, that I went, maybe I can get some people to help me do these. And that's how it started, you know, like, you don't have to have everything in place.
That is, just like staying true to yourself and not like you don't have to stress. Like, it'll come, like, everything that's meant to be, like, will come. Like, it's, like, your path. And like you said with the Indian parents, my parents are also from India, and it's very, like their structure is pretty rigid.
Yeah.
But, like, this is everyone's first time living life. Like, there's not one right path. Like, just staying true to yourself, doing, what makes you feel fulfilled. That is so important. Yeah.
And we're in Australia.
Yeah.
We're pretty safe. So I think there's also that thing of waking up every day and being grateful.
Yeah.
That we are safe, that I can let my daughter ride to school.
Yes, yeah.
That she can go to school.
Yeah.
I think that's also the thing, is just, recognise every day, how
be grateful for where you
just
are.
to wake up and exist, you should be grateful.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Like, just to like see another day, that's like life is beautiful.
Yeah, to wake up without having to look, and see a bomb going off in the I think we should just be grateful. Yeah,
definitely. Staying grateful. That's such an important, like, powerful reminder. Yeah, to be grateful that, you are safe, that you have access to everything, and, to make the most of, your life. Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why I read with my kids at night, or I take connection time with them, because I just think there's so many mothers at the moment that can't even sleep because they're scared that they won't wake up to their children,
Mm-hmm.
And I just think to myself every night, I think, oh, thank God, I just get to, hold my kids, put them to bed safe, and know that we're all going to wake up in the morning. Yeah, having that, not under rubble. Yeah, definitely. Having that, global perspective, it, really makes you, see, what really matters, Yeah. And now, to a way lighter mood. Could you walk me through a typical day in your life? Yeah. Oh, look, it depends on the day, obviously, because, but, usually I try not to do anything before 10, as in, well, I'm going to talk about my days where I work on integrity and artfulness, because obviously when I work in my government job, I just do normal hours and I get up and do my job. But usually when I'm working for myself, I don't do anything sort of before 10. That's when my brain can officially click in. Usually my day's broken up with meetings. I make them based around exercise and food, usually. Yeah. Because that way I actually get to then have lunch and, do those things. Yeah, prioritising. Yeah, and I tell my husband, my day's broken up between this and this. This and this. So my husband says to me in the morning, what are you doing today? This or this? Or lots of this and not all of that? So basically, today I've obviously done this. I've got a couple of meetings, but then the afternoon I'm co-designing some courses with a couple of elders here. Yeah. So I'll whip up a few lesson plans for them, and doing I try and break my day up between doing some of the computer stuff that I have to do, like the design work, the admin-y stuff. Yeah. Also, obviously doing some meetings, and then usually I'll go and kick the ball with my son after school, or with my daughter we'll do something together. But usually, just break up my day between work, meetings, and family, really. Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah. And I would do the normal things, I cook dinner, my husband and I share the load of that. Yeah. Got to clean the house, so all those things. And at the moment I'm binge watching Heartbreak High. So having the balance. I watch that while I'm cleaning, or things like that. But basically I just try to mix it up, and as I said to you, look, if my brain feels overwhelmed, I just stop and I rest for a little bit, and I just let my brain come back down, or I just kind of write down a list of things to do, or just bring myself back to some sort of but I always find time throughout the day just to down tools. That's so important, having that balance, and really listening to how your body feels. That's and what is one quote you live by? Oh, look, I've got it tattooed on my back. It's in Spanish though, but a life lived in fear is a life half lived. I had that tattooed on my back when I was in South America the first time, and I've pretty much since then have been really living life. It can be taken away at a moment. So I encourage everyone, again, not to be so stressed about 10 years. Just think about tomorrow and the things that you can do today that are going to make you smile tomorrow. I love that quote. It really don't live in fear. Yes, don't live in fear of what other people think. Don't live in fear of what's going to happen. Don't live in fear of if you do that, just live. Just live, not be so scared of everything. Because again, what you see on digital media and stuff is making young people scared.
Yeah. Like, I would get so scared that, like, I'm falling behind. I have to, like, do this and, like, my grades and everything. But like you said, like, a life lived in fear. Like, that's not, like...
It's not living.
Yeah, it's not living, yeah. I think, like, you have to just, like, be alive. Just, like, enjoy the present. Like, do what you love, because it's your life at the end of the day. That is so powerful. Yeah, I love that quote.
Thank you.
And finally, what advice do you have to anyone who has a dream?
Don't let anybody stop you from trying to achieve it.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, those are all the questions I have today, Lauren. Thank you so much for joining me. I absolutely loved hearing about how you've used creativity and education to create real change around the world by empowering women, children, and supporting mental health awareness. It's such an inspiring reminder that even one idea can make such a powerful impact. And thank you to everyone listening. If you enjoyed this episode of the DreamOn Podcast, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring conversations with people chasing their dreams and making them real. I'm your host, Adia Karthik, and I'll see you next time on the DreamOn Podcast. And remember, don't forget to keep on dreaming on.